first Warhammer battle report I've done. I almost said War Machine. This is where I'm displaying lists. I've got mine and Mark's up here. I will probably draw these out a little bit more in the future, but right now it's just putting stuff up. So right now I'm recording, I think I'm recording the video in the wrong resolution, so I'm hoping that either that or I did it right, and the small video that I'm looking at on my editing software here is different from what you will see. But I've cranked up the speed to double on this because I just feel like Warhammer in general plays a little less actiony than some of the other games I've recorded, and I think that it'll work out nicely for filming these battle reports. So right now I've just got one camera set up. My intention, or my goal is to eventually crank it up to 3 cameras filming, and one will be at this angle. There will be one on the dice, since there's so much dice that flies in 40K. It's probably going to be a good thing for me to have a dice cam so that the people who are commenting on the video can refer to those instead of saying like, oh, I think this is where I blew up this dice roll based on how much garbage got pulled off the table. So the third camera would be one that is set up in the opposite corner, more of a table view camera. And if I were to get really crazy, I could set that up as 4 cameras so that there are 2 different at table angles, and then I would just get really intense in switching the frames and everything and having people look at different things. I know that a lot of people do the whole like, I'm gonna follow the action around with my handheld camera. I just don't appreciate that style of battle reporting. It's just too much about filming static things and not enough about actually grabbing any of the table tactics or anything like that. And that's just my opinion, my perspective from how I approach the game. So here we've got just my Tyranids against Mark's Dark Angels, and we're about 3 minutes in and we're now just getting some action going. So in the future there'll be we won't start this until everything's ready and raring to go. This is just me we're gonna play a game, put it on camera, and see how it goes. So just while Mark's moving his stuff there, he's got his 3 Black Knights on the lower end of the screen, and towards the middle he's got a Rhino that's got a squad of 5 Primaris Marines that are randomly equipped with stuff. And then there's an Interrogator Chaplain in there. It's not a Rhino, it's a Razorback with a Flamer, some kind of twin heavy Flamer, I think. My list has been my standard 500-point list for the escalation, which has been very difficult to build for Tyranids, but this is probably the most effective 500-point list I could come up with, and it seems like a lot of people are thinking that is also pretty ridiculous. It's been a hard nut to crack, but it's 16 Termagants. They're all with flesh borers, of course. A Tervagon that's standardly equipped. I think I put adrenal glands on it because I had 1 point left over, something maybe. I can't remember. And then 3 warriors just to provide some extra synapse, which I had problems with in the past in the early versions of this list that had gargoyles in it instead. And they are more shooty, so they just seem to be really good with guns, in my opinion. I don't like their combat output, but when I've got 2 with venom cannons and 1 of them with a barb strangler, they put out quite a bit of firepower. It's variable firepower, but they put it out, and with the AP value on them and the strength value, they can really do a lot of work. And then the barb strangler, of course, is an amazing gun that gets +1 to hit against units of 10 or more, which I could envision myself taking a unit of 3 warriors just for some backline synapse with barb stranglers or venom cannons, completely just filling the the unit with them. So those guns are 36 inches and very effective at doing the jobs they need to get done. Right here, since we're all on 4x4s, they kind of have their run of the table, and they've put in some work into the. I think we were shooting into the. It might have been the Rhino. I recorded this game on Thursday night, and today is Sunday, so there are some things I'm a little fuzzy on. But I also don't have Mark here to kind of remind me of things that have happened, and currently I only have a 1 microphone setup. Like, that hasn't changed from the War Machine battle report days, but the other object is to get a second microphone, or just get someone here and see how working off of 1 microphone goes, and getting an extra commentator, because the goal is not to have this be the Brian show where Brian is talking about all the things and trying to infer what my opponents are doing and all that. So the other thing you'll notice in this is that I was pretty dirty with trying to get the angle right. Right now it looks like the world is tilting towards Mark's side of the table. I just for some reason couldn't get the angle to straighten up, and I think it had a lot to do with we're playing on a table that's about 3.5 feet off the ground. It's probably less. It's probably 3 feet. 3 feet up off the ground, and is butted up right against a wall. So I wasn't able to get the greatest angle, or get behind the camera, so that I could actually like tilt it and look at the screen of my computer at the same time. But I think I'm going to try and put it on a lower table next time and just see what happens. I'm kind of feeling things out here to try and deliver the best experience that I possibly can. Right now this is just about getting the format down, and just seeing how 40K battle reports through video. Like I had said, I prefer the way War Machine battle reports are organized. They just seem to function better, in my opinion. It looks like over here, this is the shitty thing too, is I can barely see the size of this thing. It's like in maybe a 2x3 box on my computer, so I'm really hoping this doesn't get fucked up when it gets transferred over. But it looks like Mark brought his Marines out to play. Oh wait, no. This is how terrible it is. My Carnifex actually just made a long bomb charge on the Rhino. And these things, Carnifexes print money. Like, this one is 94 points, and it can handle infantry and heavy armor. The only thing is that it's a coin flip often, because he's hitting on 4s and wounding on 4s with this Rhino. It's AP3 and does 3 damage, so whatever he does, he's usually getting work out of it. But in this case, it looks like the money was certainly printed, and he did take out that Rhino. You can see he's disembarking the Primaris Marines, and then his Interrogator Chaplain is going to pop up kind of right behind them. Either that, or I really messed up this Rhino and they're disembarking now. I'm sure Mark could tell you all about it if he were here, but I won't put words in Mark's mouth again like I have in the past, although it's probably what I'm going to do anyways throughout this little battle report here. I'm sure that at larger games and in the future, these will go, or the games will be a little bit more quick moving, because right now we're all kind of transitioning from War Machine being one of our only games we play to 40K being the more dominant game that we're playing right now. Not that we're just abandoning War Machine, it's just we're all having a whole lot of fun right now playing the game we all started playing minis with. Other than myself, I think my first mini experience was with Mage Knight back in, I don't know what year it was, but I think the Invasion block had come out for Magic, so that's when I got my first experience with mini wargaming, and that was with a Clicks game. So other than that, it was 40K started in 5th edition, maybe, what? It's got to be 6 years now, something like that. I'm not sure. So it doesn't look like I killed that rhino, but it does look like Mark decided to disembark just to make, because there was no reason. Once I got a charge off on him, the rhino just kind of becomes a little bit on the worthless side when it gets tied up. I ate some flamer shots with that Carnifex, but it wasn't too big of a problem for me because he's got 8 wounds at a 3+ save. He doesn't degrade, so that's one of the really great things about Carnifexes. I can see myself easily taking like a brood of 3 Carnifexes and then having Old One Eye kind of back them up. Their weapons are phenomenal. Like, I think I'd probably equip them with a pair of Scything Talons, a pair of Crushing Claws, just so they could do whatever they needed to do. Like, if I needed to guarantee a lot of hits on something like a Dreadnought or something, I would put the Scything Talon in, and Crushing Claws would go into more vehicles, just because it's going to be easier to wound those if I need to really take them down. So Mark's booking it into these here ruins, which I know is another thing that I'm working on. I've got like 3 huge sheets of foam board sitting in my hobby area, and those will shortly be turned into more unique looking ruins, and we'll be working on some other area terrain, maybe some more functional things for 40k. A lot of this stuff is left over from the time when we first started in 5th, and the game was very different then from what it is now. So just trying to make terrain more relevant on the table, because 8th edition doesn't seem to have a lot of relevant terrain, especially with the way cover works for vehicles and monsters now. If you don't get cover, if you're a monster or a vehicle, you can only just not be seen. So the line of sight blocking terrain is going to be important for a lot of fair and balanced games, I guess. I think this was where Mark put shots into the Termagants, if I'm not mistaken. He just kind of booked out and started shooting into them. I think that's what's happening here. So with this list, I always have Catalyst on the Termagants. So they always, more often than not, I'm not getting my 6+ save on them. I'll just have Catalyst up on them all the time. Tyrannid's spell list is really phenomenal with the buffs and the aggressiveness that they can throw out. Plus Smite is hands down. I cast it every game. It's always good, and it's a great option to have with a Psyker, especially if they have shooting too. Like, they can just put out so much damage. I think just about everything in Tyranids that can be a Psyker has a gun, except for the Broodlord, unless you don't equip them unless you don't equip the other models properly. So there's a lot of Termagants missing from that unit. Those Black Knights and the Primaris Marines laid down some pain. There are a decent amount of Termagants still behind what we were playing as a barricade. So the rest of them are just kind of hanging out. The real goal against this list for any player playing against it is to, in my opinion, eliminate the Termagants first. If you don't get those little guys gone, they just kind of overrun you. It feels like a lot of the things you're doing don't matter when it comes down to it. I mean, if you leave me with, in this list, if you leave me with 6 dudes in the unit, and you kill 10, it doesn't matter. Like, they're gonna come back, and you're gonna have to deal with them all over again. So every meaningful thing you thought you did that turn just doesn't matter. And at 500 points, it's pretty ball breaking. It's just it's not a pleasant experience. So you can see here that I'm sending the Termagants at the bikes. I think they're a little bit more You know what? They're harder to get rid of, but I figure if I can chunk these guys up a little bit, that they're doing their job then. The chances of the Termagants actually wiping the bikes out's fairly slim. They need 4s to hit, re-rolling 1s because of the Tervagon, and then they need 5s to wound, and there's no re-rolls out of that, so it's not the greatest for them. So you can kind of see I'm just slowly pushing the horde up here. The Tervagon popped out the rest of the unit. Like that was Mark killed, I want to say 6 of them that turn, and all of them just kind of came back. So the Space Marine lists at 500 points just have a really hard time putting out a large amount of consistent fire against a list like this, especially with Mark bringing a more elite army. I mean, he's got a Razorback, which is eating up some points. Primaris Marines are typically fairly pricey. Black Knights are very expensive. They're very good, but if you overwhelm them with a volume of shots, which was what I'm throwing now at them, is all these Tervagon shots, or not Tervagon, Termagant shots. You know, they've only had a couple saves, but I did end up pulling a bike off. So all of that shooting, 1 bike, and I've lost nothing so far this game. It's a pretty big advantage. So I can see with the way I've rolled my dice here that these are the shots from the Tyranid Warriors, and they're going into the bikes as well. Just the bikes really do seem, with those plasma guns, to be the most threatening thing to my Tervagon, and if I do lose that, it's a big deal. There just isn't much at 500 points to take it down in one shot. I think only 1 person's done it, and that was a guard player with a bunch of Tempest Scions or whatever. Lots of plasma and Melta shots. The Melta shots hurt quite a bit with the 2d6 or d6 damage. I think it's 2d6 because there were 2 Meltas in the unit or something. I can't remember. Different game. It looks like after all the warrior shots, they kind of shit the bed a little bit and only put 1 wound on a bike. So I've chosen to send the Termagants in now. They did an advance. They have assault weapons, and now I'm just getting them in there, getting them dug in. So only a few ended up actually making the charge as far as like being able to get in range, but getting that 3-inch pile in puts a few more dudes in, and with how little attacks 2 bikes have, I don't mind sitting over there for 3 turns trying to chunk away or chip away at the bikes, because they have the weapons that are most well suited to kill the Tervagon. So getting them tied up is a really big deal. Now I think in this case there are some things that could have been done to circumvent their tar pitting here, but it's not something you would typically expect from I don't know. I think you'd expect it because it's just a jam. You know, it's just tying down some models that are way more points than them, because I think that the Termagant loadout that I have is like 60 points or something, and I want to say those bikes are like 30 points a piece or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. I've only been able to really focus in on my rules and not so much anyone else's. So the Carnifex puts down the Razorback with no real effort. Doing 3 damage per swing that connects is a really big deal. So you can see the Carnifex just kind of lumbering towards, he consolidates towards the Interrogator Chaplain that's hanging out behind the building there. I'm just trying to pinch Mark's army off a bit so that he doesn't really have the option to go into the Tervagon at all. I mean, the Tervagon's pretty far away, but there's 2 very big problems in front of him. One of them is a Carnifex that's staring down his HQ and his Primaris Marines, and the other one is what is considered to be virtually endless horde of Termagants going into his bikes. So I don't think when the swings started happening with Termagants that they really did much of anything. and I didn't expect them to. Like I said, I'm not trying to charge the bikes to kill them. I'm just making it so that their guns are really, really worthless because they're not doing anything while they're in combat. So one of the things that is important to know about 8th edition is the importance of fleeing or falling back. I guess falling back is the book term. But these bikers, they have some primo points stuck to them. So I think that in order to try and circumvent the efficacy of the termagants, Mark probably could have chosen to fall back with the bikes since they have such a high move value, and book it around or through those, even through those ruins, to get behind his interrogator chaplain and his Primaris Marines. That way the termagants are they're not able to get into the bikes as easily, and now I've got, then the bikes end up being closer to the Carnifex, and they're able to maybe zip around to get behind that stacked bunker unit there and start peppering some shots into the Tervagon, who really doesn't like plasma. I mean, he's got 13 wounds, but supercharged plasma shots are not what he's wanting to do. And I think I can't remember if the chaplain rerolls ones against enemy models indefinitely, or if he gives the 6-inch bubble to reroll them only in combat. I think it's only combat, but I'm not 100% sure. So I believe here is where the Primaris Marines are shooting into the Carnifex that's breathing down the neck of the interrogator chaplain. At toughness 7, he's not easy to wound, and the bolters that the Primaris Marines have, they do give an Egg 1 AP, but like I had said, everything about the Carnifex is a coin toss except for that save. So going down to 4-ups makes it still hurts, but I end up coming through with the saves like a champ. The Carnifex is a very resilient, cheap model. I know that it seems like people are trying to put guns on them lately, and I just don't see the reason why. They're really good for crushing down tanks and taking down heavy armored targets or lots of wounds in one model. So I'm gonna stick with the melee variants. So now I think the Primaris Marines have decided to charge the Carnifex before it charges something else, and that is it's not a bad thing at all. I don't think they're properly equipped to take it out, but the like I'd said, not like I said, but I believe that the Black Knights are really holding up a lot of points to get some of those specialist weapons. Even the Interrogator Chaplain's weapon isn't quite well suited to be taking down a Carnifex all that well. You can put a couple damage on him, so I guess if he hits enough, then maybe it would work. Because I think his Crozius does 2 damage a swing. I'm not 100% sure though. Something that my opponent could answer if he was around here. But like I said, format is what I'm going for, and eventually I'll go ahead and maybe pull someone into the hobby room here and get them in on this, hopefully soon. I would like to make it the next battle report. So here you do see that the Carnifex starts taking some wounds, mostly because my hand goes to tilt his wound marker down, which I found out the best way for me to keep track of wounds is to just start the dice at the highest wound number for them and then have it follow them around. I am picking up some dials from Muson Minis that are magnetic, and they have numbers on them, and they're just 50 mil and 30 mil bases, or not bases but discs, and they just kind of follow the dudes around, and that'll be a really clean way for me to keep track of these wounds and let my opponents know how they're sitting, instead of having dice that can get bumped and all that jazz. So I didn't say it earlier, but I've got some time, it looks like, to talk, and we're playing, I think it's Secure and Control, where there's the two objectives that you place in your deployment zone that can't be more than 6 inches from any table edge. At 500 points, I will say that the objectives feel quite worthless. You're usually, at least in my opinion when I've been playing, or my experience when I've been playing, I either table my opponent or they table me. I have been tabled twice, once by orcs, because hitting on 3s in combat with 30 dudes is really crazy, and then once by AdMech, because their guns, the 2 dune crawlers that were brought, had just enough firepower in the right ways to take out what I was bringing, and I wasn't able, I didn't approach the game properly. So here it looks like Mark's getting that close combat in with those Primaris Marines, I think, because that's a lot of dice to be rolling for bikes. I don't know if it doesn't look like the Carnifex took any damage on it, because I didn't reach over to rotate his die. So the Termagants are piling in here. Now I'm getting a few more attacks. It's a little, with widgets, it's super easy to find out how many models are within an inch of an inch. So I'm just kind of wiggle those right above them and can kind of get an estimate from there. It's fairly simple instead of dangling a tape measure over the whole pile of stuff. The Termagants in close combat, they really are quite terrible. On these ones, they're hitting on 4s, wounding on 5s still. It's not super great. I guess it's just like their guns, but at least their guns are strength 4 and they're only strength 3, so when you go into something that's 4, it's still bad. So some of the Termagants go down from the bikers, so the Tervagons popping up there just to keep filling them up, and I think what'll end up happening, or what my plan is that eventually the Termagants are going to be piling in a way that can get the Tervagon in to where I can do some business, because I can even choose to not progenate, I don't know. I can choose not to spew dudes out of my chest, and then that way I can kind of get a landing spot for the Tervagon. The warriors have left the bunker. Everything that could threaten them is tied up in combat, so it's time to get them up in case the Carnifex takes a digger. Because Synapse also is not, it's not as important right now at least in this point level. The my Tervagon is a work in progress, so he kind of flips off his base every now and again because it's just not hammered down or pinned down yet. I did end up choosing to I guess Mark's turn went fast. I don't know what happened here. But the Tervagon did pile. He's going kind of more towards the Interrogator Chaplain. I think it was so I could get into smite range on them, because I think where I was positioned, the bikers looked like they were a little closer. I'm not sure. Like I said, it's not recalling quite well, but all these 500-point games are kind of blending together. I think I'm sitting at like somewhere between 13 and 17 games played in the 2 weeks that 8th edition has been out. So they all are kind of blending together. So you can see I reached over to crank the die down, so the Carnifex lost another wound or 2. He's swinging back now. I think in this one I ended up putting a bunch of Scything Talon attacks into these guys. I don't think the Thresher Scythe would have really helped me out any better, because then I'm hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, and I'd rather hit on 4s, wound on 3s, I think, yeah. And then they just get a 6+ save instead of a 5+ save or 4+ save, so I think it just works out better that way. And a Thresher Scythe doesn't kill them in one blow, whereas a Scything Talon will kill them in one blow. The Black Knights take off 3 Termagants, and they pile in turns go really fast when you're locked in combat like this, just flopping back and forth. Psychic phase fight, psychic phase fight. So they're going into the bikes again. It looks like they might have forced a couple wounds on, or a couple saves on them, and the bikes kind of shunted them off. They're just kind of doing a big old jerk-off fest over there, circle jerk. So the bikes go. No, I don't know what's going on here. That this is where I should be recording these a little closer to when they happened, and having the other person here, because I'm sure Mark understands exactly what he did on these turns, or not exactly, but roughly what he had done, because he's got a different perspective than I do, whereas I'm just like, kill everything. And then, since we all are fairly new coming to 40k, we know all of us skipped the last half of 6th edition, and then most of us didn't play in 7th edition. I tried twice to get back into it, but it just wasn't a game that I was really interested in throwing around at that time, because the rules just didn't jive with me. So there's a lot of like book looking, and a decent amount of informing other players that are around me what's going on in the game. Like we had 3 games going that night, so people had questions, so I would just open my book and say, hey, got the answer here. So I imagine that will that'll go down as the as time goes on here. So pulling more termagants, but you can see the big thing is that line that's starting closest to the ruins and going towards the Turvagon, that's staying kind of intact, so that I can make sure that the Turvagon can end its movement wherever and still pop the termagants into that unit. It's just a good thing to have him close enough to it. So at this point, I decided that I was going to try and go for some points. I did get first blood in this game from the Rhino, and I currently have Line Breaker, I think, from the Carnifex over there. He might be a little bit out of 12 inches, but the perspective on this table is so warped that I can't quite tell. I do believe the Interrogator Chaplain is now gone. He might still be hanging out back there, but I do have Slay the Warlord, so I just wanted to get on the objective to play the objective game, because it's good practice to get used to that, even though at 500 points it doesn't matter so much. So the Termagants are going into the Black Knights again, and they get, I think they force a couple wounds here. There's nothing too pressing. It looks like they didn't force any wounds at all, so we just go back to Mark's turn, and it's time to fight again. So the Termagants pile in on his fight turn and start swinging to the fences. So they're just not putting any meaningful damage on these Black Knights, except for we did get 1 wound to kill that 1 bike. So in the 3 or 4 turns, or 3 turns that have gone by now where they've had them tied up, they have not killed the bike. So, or they just did a wound. So the Carnifex ran to the back. He advanced hard to get to that objective. Once again, I just wanted to play the scenario, even though I don't feel like the 40k scenarios are super tight. So Termagants swing, and they kill the last bike. So music is probably too loud back here, but that was the game. You can give me any feedback or criticism. This is really raw, so not expecting a whole lot. I hope you enjoyed it.